The gunshot that echoed through the canyon wasn't what brought Kade Zimmerman to his knees beside the creek that scorching August afternoon in 1878, but rather the sight of a woman in a faded blue dress scrubbing blood from a white cotton shirt in the rushing water. He'd been riding through the Arizona Territory for 3 weeks straight, herding cattle from his ranch outside Jackson to the railroad depot in Tucson, when his horse had thrown a shoe near this nameless tributary of the Salt River. The mare needed rest anyway, her flanks dark with sweat under the relentless sun. Kade had dismounted, leading her toward the sound of water, expecting nothing more than a chance to refill his canteen and maybe catch a few minutes of shade under the cottonwood trees that lined the banks. Instead, he found her. She knelt on a flat rock at the water's edge, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun that had come half undone, wisps clinging to her damp neck. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, revealing arms that had seen hard work but maintained a feminine grace. She scrubbed at the shirt with intensity, her knuckles white around the fabric, her jaw set in determination. The water around her hands ran pink. Kade cleared his throat, not wanting to startle her, but she jerked upright anyway, spinning to face him with wide eyes the color of honey in sunlight. Her hand moved instinctively to her side, where no weapon waited, and he saw the fear flash across her features before she forced it down, replacing it with a careful blankness that told him more than any expression could have. "I don't mean you any harm, madam," he said quickly, raising both hands to show they were empty. "My horse needs water and I heard the creek." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his dusty clothes, the worn leather chaps, the hat that had seen better days. Her gaze lingered on the revolver at his hip before moving to his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied some internal judgment because she turned back to her washing, though her shoulders remained tense. "There's room enough for both of us," she said quietly. Her voice carried a trace of something refined beneath the weariness, an education that seemed at odds with her solitary position by this remote creek. Kade led his mare forward slowly, giving the woman plenty of space as he let the horse drink. Up close, he could see more details. The dress she wore had been mended multiple times, careful stitches holding together tears along the hem. A canvas bag sat on the bank nearby, bulging with what he assumed were more clothes. No horse, no wagon, no sign of a camp. "You traveling alone?" he asked, then immediately regretted the directness of the question. It wasn't his business, and out here, asking too many questions could get a man killed. She didn't answer right away, working a particularly stubborn stain with renewed vigor. Finally, she sat back on her heels, pushing a strand of hair from her face with the back of her wet hand. "I am," she said, meeting his eyes with a defiance that seemed to cost her. "I'm trying to start over." Those 5 words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Kade had been in the Arizona Territory long enough to know that people didn't just start over without a reason, and they usually didn't do it alone unless they had no other choice. He looked at the blood-stained shirt again, then back at her face, noting for the first time the fading yellow bruise along her jawline that makeup or time had nearly erased. "That your blood on that shirt?" he asked, his voice gentler than before. "No." The word came out flat, final. She returned to scrubbing, her movements almost violent now. "It belonged to someone who won't be needing it anymore." Kade's hand moved instinctively closer to his revolver, not drawing but ready. She noticed the movement and let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "I didn't kill anyone, if that's what you're thinking," she said. "But I won't mourn him either. Some men deserve what they get, and Jacob Ortiz was one of them." The name meant nothing to Kade, but the weight with which she spoke it told him everything he needed to know. He'd seen enough of the world to understand that women didn't typically end up alone in the wilderness scrubbing blood from shirts unless something had gone terribly wrong or terribly right, depending on perspective. "How far are you planning to go?" he asked, crouching down to refill his canteen upstream from where she worked. She was quiet again, and when he looked over, he saw her staring at her own reflection in the water, her expression lost somewhere between grief and relief. "As far as it takes," she finally whispered. "Jackson, maybe. I heard they might need a school teacher there. I can read and write and cipher numbers. I taught at a girls' academy in San Antonio before." She trailed off, her hands stilling in the water. "Before I made the mistake of thinking I could have a normal life." Jackson. Kade felt something shift in his chest, though he couldn't have said exactly what. That was his town, or as close to his town as anywhere could be. His ranch sat just 5 miles outside it, a modest spread but his own, built with his own hands and sweat over the last 6 years. "Jackson's a good town," he said carefully. "Sheriff's fair, people mind their own business mostly. Could use a teacher. The last one headed back east last spring when her father took ill." Hope flickered across her face so quickly he almost missed it. "You know it. I live there. Ranch just outside town. Name's Kade Zimmerman." He touched the brim of his hat in a proper greeting, realizing they'd been talking for 10 minutes without proper introductions. She hesitated, then seemed to come to some internal decision. "June Oaks. Or it was June Ortiz for 8 months, but I'm going back to my maiden name. Seems right since I'm starting fresh." 8 months. Kay did the math quickly. Married young and not married long. The bruise on her face, the blood on the shirt, the careful way she held herself like she expected a blow at any moment. It all painted a picture he'd seen before. His own mother had worn that same careful tension in the years before his father had finally drunk himself to death. "Miss Oaks," he said deliberately, using her chosen name. "Jackson's a good 3 days' walk from here, and that's if you know the way and don't run into trouble. No offense, madam, but you don't look equipped for that kind of journey." She lifted her chin, and he saw steel beneath the fear. "I've made it this far." "How far is that?" 2 days from Tucson," Kade whistled low. 2 days through rough country with nothing but a bag of clothes and whatever food she might have carried. The woman had grit, he'd give her that. But grit only took you so far when the sun could cook you in your own skin, and raiders, both Apache and white, roamed the territory looking for easy targets. "I'm heading back to Jackson myself," he said, making the decision even as the words left his mouth. "Cattle drive's done, and I'm ready to sleep in my own bed. You could ride with me if you want. My horse can carry double for a while, and I've got supplies enough for both of us." Suspicion clouded her features immediately. "Why would you help me?" It was a fair question. Out here, kindness often came with strings attached. But Kade had learned long ago that the kind of man you were showed most clearly in how you treated those who couldn't help you back. "Because I've got a sister about your age back in Missouri," he said honestly. "And I'd hope if she ever found herself in trouble, some decent man would help her get where she needed to go without expecting anything in return. Consider it paying forward." June studied him for a long moment, and Kade held still under her scrutiny, letting her see whatever she needed to see. Finally, she nodded once, a quick decisive movement. "I'd be grateful for the help, Mr. Zimmerman, but I should tell you if Jacob isn't dead, he'll be looking for me, and if he is dead, his brother Miguel will be. Either way, traveling with me might bring you trouble." "Who did the shooting?" Kade asked, nodding toward the shirt. "I did." Her voice didn't waver. "He came home drunk 3 nights ago, angrier than usual. Started in on me about supper being cold, then about how I couldn't give him sons, then about how my family had cheated his family in the marriage arrangement." Same things he always said, but this time he had his gun in his hand, waving it around. I don't think he meant to shoot himself when we struggled. The gun went off, got him in the side. He went down hard. And you ran. I took what I could carry and walked out the door while he was bleeding on our kitchen floor. Didn't stop to see if he'd survive it. Didn't much care. She said it matter-of-factly, but her hands shook as she wrung out the shirt. Does that make me a terrible person? Kade thought about his father, about the nights he'd heard his mother crying through thin walls, about the day he'd been big enough and brave enough to put himself between them and take the beating instead. He thought about the relief he'd felt when they'd buried the old man and the guilt that had come with that relief. Makes you human, he said quietly. Makes you a survivor. Something in June's expression cracked then, just for a moment, before she pulled it back together. She stood, wringing the water from the shirt as best she could before folding it carefully and placing it in her bag. Her movements were precise, controlled, like she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. When can we leave? She asked. Soon as my horse is rested. Hour, maybe. You got any food? She shook her head. Ran out yesterday. Been drinking from the creek and hoping I'd reach somewhere civilized before I collapsed. Kade walked back to where his mare stood and pulled his saddlebags down, rummaging through until he found the dried beef and hardtack he'd been saving. It wasn't much, but it would keep them both going until they reached civilization. He handed half to June, who took it with a quiet thank you that suggested she wasn't used to accepting help. They sat in companionable silence while they ate, the creek burbling beside them and cicadas singing in the cottonwoods. Kade found himself watching her from the corner of his eye, noting the way she made each bite of jerky last as long as possible, the way she closed her eyes when she swallowed like it was the finest meal she'd ever had. She was pretty in an understated way, the kind of beauty that snuck up on you rather than announcing itself. But more than that, there was something in the set of her shoulders, in the way she'd looked him dead in the eye when she admitted to shooting her husband, that spoke to a strength he admired. You said you were a teacher before, he ventured after a while. What you teach? June's expression softened slightly. Literature, mostly. Some history and geography. I loved it. The girls were so eager to learn, so full of questions about the world. I used to think I'd do that forever, just teach and read and maybe travel during summers. She laughed, but there was sadness in it. My father had other ideas. Said a woman my age needed a husband more than she needed a job. When Jacob's family approached with the marriage offer, Father saw a chance to make a good match and took it. Didn't much matter what I wanted. How old are you? Kade asked, then added quickly, if you don't mind me asking. 23. You? 26. Old enough to know better but young enough to still make stupid choices, he said with a slight smile. It was his mother's phrase, one she'd used often in those last years before the consumption had taken her. June returned the smile and it transformed her face, chasing away some of the haunted look. I'll remember that. Right now, I feel about 100 years old. You've had a hard time of it, Kade acknowledged, but Jackson's a good place for second chances. Folks there have mostly come from somewhere else, looking to build something new. They don't pry too much into what came before. What's your story then? June asked, turning the question back on him. How does a young man end up with his own ranch in Arizona territory? Kade took a long drink from his canteen before answering. Nothing too dramatic. Father died when I was 20, left my mother and sister with nothing but debts. I worked odd jobs in Missouri for a while, saved every penny I could. When Mama passed 2 years later, I sent my sister Emma to live with our aunt in St. Louis, somewhere she'd be safe and have opportunities. Then I headed west with what money I had and a head full of dreams about open spaces and freedom. Do you miss them? Your sister, your home. Emma writes every month, tells me about the city, about the bookshop where she works. She's happy there, got a beau who treats her right. That's all I need to know. He pulled a blade of grass and twisted it between his fingers. As for home, well, this is home now. The ranch isn't much yet, just a small house and enough land for a decent herd. But it's mine, earned with honest work, and nobody can take it from me. June nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. That sounds like paradise. They finished eating and rested a bit longer, until the worst of the afternoon heat had passed. Kade saddled his mare, making sure everything was secure, then helped June mount up. She sat stiffly at first, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of sharing a horse, but there was no help for it. He swung up behind her, careful to keep a respectful distance even though the saddle forced them closer than propriety would normally allow. "You ever ridden before?" he asked as he took up the reins. "A few times when I was young. My father had a gelding he'd let me ride around the paddock." "Well, just hold on and trust the horse. She's steady, won't throw you unless you do something truly foolish." They set off at a gentle walk, following the creek north until it joined with a larger tributary, then turning west toward where Kade knew a decent trail wound through the canyon. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the rocks in shades of orange and red that seemed to glow from within. It was beautiful country, harsh and unforgiving but beautiful all the same. June relaxed slightly as they rode, her back not quite pressed against his chest but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her through their clothes. She smelled like creek water and soap and something else, something soft that made him think of the wild verbena that grew along the river in spring. "Tell me about Jackson," she said after a while. "What's it really like?" Kade thought about his town, about the people and places that had become familiar over the years. "It's small, maybe 200 people on a busy day. Got a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a schoolhouse that doubles as a meeting hall. Sheriff's office is right in the middle of town, and old Thomas Wright runs it with his deputy, young fellow named Peter Chase. They keep things mostly peaceful. Mostly. We get the occasional drunk causing trouble, and sometimes cattle rustlers try their luck, but nothing too serious. Most folks are just trying to make an honest living, whether it's ranching or farming or running a business. The land isn't easy, but it rewards hard work. And they really need a teacher, desperately. Got about 15 children in town of school age, and they've been making do with whoever can spare time to teach them basics. But it's not the same as having someone dedicated to it, someone who actually knows how to teach properly." He paused, then added, "You'd be good at it, I think. The kids would be lucky to have you." "You don't even know me," June said softly. "I know you walked 2 days through dangerous country with nothing but determination keeping you going. I know you taught at an academy and loved it. I know you had the courage to leave a bad situation even though you didn't know what waited ahead. That's enough for me to know you'd be good at teaching children, because you're brave and smart and you don't give up easy." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you. You don't know how much I needed to hear something like that." They rode until the sun set, and the stars emerged in their thousands, so many more than you could ever see back east where buildings and smoke obscured the sky. Kade found a good spot to make camp in a small canyon with rock walls on 3 sides, defensible and sheltered from the wind. He helped June down from the horse, noting how she swayed slightly when her feet touched ground, exhausted from the day and the days before it. "Sit and rest," he told her. "I'll get a fire going and see about some supper." "I can help," she protested, but he waved her off. "You've been walking for 2 days with no food. Sit." She sat, and he saw the relief in her posture as she let herself relax against a smooth boulder. While he worked on starting a fire, laying out dried wood he'd collected along the way and coaxing flames from his tinderbox, he found himself acutely aware of her presence. It had been a long time since he'd shared a camp with anyone, and never with a woman. He'd been alone since coming to Arizona, focused on building his ranch and making a life for himself, with no time or inclination for romance. But there was something about June that drew him, something beyond her obvious beauty. Maybe it was the strength she'd shown, or the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him when he'd offered to help, like she'd forgotten people could be kind without expecting something in return. Whatever it was, he felt it settling in his chest like a warm coal, something that could easily grow into a fire if he let it. He pushed the thought away. She just escaped a terrible marriage and was in no position to think about such things. The last thing she needed was another man making demands or expecting anything from her. He'd help her get to Jackson, help her settle in if she wanted, and that would be the end of it. She deserved peace and safety, not complications. The fire caught and grew, pushing back the darkness. Kade put coffee on to boil and heated some beans in a small pot, adding the last of his bacon for flavor. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and filling, and when he handed June a plate, her eyes lit up like he'd given her a feast. They ate in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them and the night sounds of the desert forming a symphony around them. Coyotes sang in the distance, their yips and howls eerie but familiar. An owl called from somewhere overhead, hunting in the darkness. "It's so different out here," June said eventually, gazing up at the stars. "In San Antonio you couldn't see half this many stars, and it was never this quiet. There was always noise, people and wagons and music from the saloons. You miss it?" She considered the question seriously. "I miss parts of it. The bookshop where I'd buy novels, the cafe that served real coffee, not just the bitter stuff we had at home. The other teachers I worked with. But no, I don't miss the city itself. There was always someone watching, always someone ready to judge or gossip. At least out here, the land doesn't care about your past mistakes." "Everyone makes mistakes," Kade said. "Difference is whether you learn from them or let them define you." "Wise words from a cowboy," June said with a hint of teasing in her voice. "My mother used to say that." She was a wise woman, dealt a bad hand but never let it break her spirit, not completely anyway. He poured more coffee for both of them. "She's the one who taught me to judge people by their actions, not their circumstances." Said the finest person she ever knew was a former slave who helped her when she was pregnant with Emma and father was off drinking somewhere. That woman had nothing, but she shared what little she had and never asked for anything back. "Your mother sounds like she was remarkable." She was. Kade felt the familiar ache of loss, dulled now by time but never truly gone. "I like to think she'd approve of what I'm doing, helping you get to Jackson. She always said we're all of us just one bad day away from needing a hand up, and to never forget that." June wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, using it for warmth as the desert night grew cold. "I hope I can meet your sister someday. She's lucky to have a brother like you. Maybe you will. Emma keeps threatening to visit, see the ranch and the Wild West for herself. Though I suspect the reality would disappoint her. It's not as exciting as the dime novels make it out to be." "I don't know," June said, a smile playing at her lips. "I'd say the last few days have been fairly exciting, terrifying but exciting." They talked for a while longer, sharing stories of their childhoods and the paths that had led them to this moment. Kade learned that June had grown up in Georgia, the youngest of 4 daughters, and had moved to Texas with her family after the war. Her father had been a banker who lost everything, and never quite recovered his pride or his fortune. Her mother had died of fever when June was 16, leaving her to help raise her younger sisters while finishing her own education. "That's why I became a teacher," she explained. "I loved learning and I loved sharing that with others. For a few years I thought I'd found my place in the world. Then Father decided it was time I married and everything changed." "You could have said no," Kade pointed out gently. "I did say no, multiple times. But Father was determined, and Jacob's family offered a good bride price. He needed the money, and I was the one daughter he hadn't married off yet. In the end, I agreed because I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Jacob seemed charming when he was courting, brought me flowers and spoke pretty words. I didn't see the anger underneath until after we were married, and it was too late." The bitterness in her voice cut through the night air. Kade wanted to say something comforting, but what could he say? That she'd made the right choice leaving. She already knew that things would get better. Empty words when she was still running, still looking over her shoulder for pursuers who might or might not be coming. Instead, he said, "You're safe now. Whatever happens, you've got at least one friend in Jackson, and I'll make sure others know you're under my protection. Nobody will bother you there." June looked at him across the fire, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't owe me anything." "Don't need to owe someone to do right by them," Kade said simply. "Besides, something tells me you'd do the same for someone else if positions were reversed." "I'd like to think so." She wiped at her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the display of emotion. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be weepy. It's just been a long few days, and I'm not used to anyone being decent to me anymore." "No apologies needed. You've been through more than most people see in a lifetime. You're allowed to have feelings about it." He set up their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, giving her privacy and ensuring propriety even though they were alone in the wilderness. June settled into hers gratefully, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Kade lay awake for a while longer, keeping watch and thinking about the woman who'd stumbled into his life so unexpectedly. The second day of riding brought them through rougher country, rocky hills and narrow passes where Kade had to lead the horse carefully to avoid injury. June held on without complaint, though he could tell she was sore from the unaccustomed riding. They stopped frequently to rest, and he made sure she drank plenty of water and ate what little food they had left. Around midday, they spotted riders in the distance, 3 men moving fast across the valley below them. Kade reined in immediately, pulling his horse behind a large boulder. "Could be anyone," he murmured, but no sense taking chances. June had gone rigid in front of him, her breathing shallow. "What if it's Miguel? He'd send men to look for me." "Even if it is, they're too far away to have seen us, and they're heading south while we're going west. We'll wait here until they are out of sight, then keep moving." They waited in tense silence until the riders disappeared over a ridge, then continued on their way, both of them more alert now. The incident reminded Kade that June's freedom was fragile, dependent on distance and luck and the vastness of the territory. It also made him angry, a slow burning anger at the idea that she had to run and hide, that she couldn't just live her life without fear. "Tell me more about the ranch," June said after a while, clearly trying to distract herself from worry. "What's it like?" Kade was grateful for the change of subject. "It's not much to look at yet. Just a small house I built myself, 3 rooms and a porch that faces east so you can watch the sunrise. Got a barn for the horses and a few head of cattle, chickens for eggs, a vegetable garden that struggles in the heat but manages to produce enough to keep me fed. There's a creek that runs through the north edge of the property, never runs dry even in summer. It sounds peaceful. It is. Sometimes too peaceful." Can go days without seeing another soul except the animals, but I like it that way. After growing up in a house full of tension and anger, the quiet feels like a blessing. I think I'd like that too, June said softly. I used to dream about having a little cottage somewhere far from everything, with books and a garden and no one to answer to but myself. Nothing stopping you from having that in Jackson. Town's got a small library, and the schoolhouse comes with a quarters attached where the teacher can live. It's just one room, but it's private and clean. Mrs. Henderson, who runs the general store, she keeps the place tidy between teachers. You've really thought this through, haven't you? Helping me settle in Jackson. Kade shrugged, though she couldn't see it. Seems like the right thing to do. Besides, if you're going to be teaching the town's children, folks will want to know you're respectable and have someone vouching for you. Out here, reputation matters. They made camp that night near a spring Kade knew, a small oasis of green in the brown landscape. There was even grass for the horse to graze, and the water was cold and sweet. June washed her face and hands while Kade tended to the mare, checking her hooves and making sure the saddle hadn't rubbed her wrong. How much further? June asked as they prepared their meager supper, the last of the supplies running low. If we start early tomorrow and make good time, we should reach Jackson by late afternoon. Town's just on the other side of that range. He pointed to the mountains visible in the distance, purple in the evening light. June nodded, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. I'm nervous, she admitted. What if they don't want me? What if they ask too many questions about where I came from? Then you tell them as much or as little as you want. I'll introduce you as a friend who's looking to start fresh, and that'll be enough for most folks. Anyone who pries too much, well, they can deal with me. You do that. Defend my reputation even though we've only known each other 2 days. I told you I judge people by their actions. In 2 days, you've shown more courage and strength than most people show in a lifetime. That's enough for me. June smiled at him, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. You're a good man, Kade Zimmerman. I'm glad I met you by that creek. I'm glad too, he said, and meant it more than he probably should. That night they talked longer, sharing more stories and dreams. Kade told her about his plans to expand the ranch, maybe get into horse breeding if he could save up enough to buy good stock. June talked about the books she loved, the poems she'd memorized, the way teaching made her feel alive and useful. They discovered shared opinions on everything from politics to the best way to make coffee, and they laughed together over silly things, the kind of easy laughter that came from growing comfortable with someone. Kade found himself wishing the journey could last longer, that they could spend more time in this bubble outside the real world where it was just the two of them and the desert and the stars. But he knew that was selfish. June needed stability and safety, not more uncertainty. And he needed to remember that she was running from one relationship gone wrong and wouldn't be interested in starting anything new, especially not with someone she barely knew. Still, as he lay in his bedroll that night, listening to her soft breathing from across the fire, he couldn't help but imagine what it might be like if circumstances were different. If they'd met in town under normal conditions, if she hadn't been hurt and running, if he wasn't just the stranger who'd helped her when she needed it most. He imagined taking her to the church social, introducing her properly to the town, courting her the right way with flowers and Sunday dinners and long walks in the evening. He fell asleep with those thoughts, and dreamed of honey-colored eyes and a smile that could light up the darkness. They woke before dawn on the 3rd day, both eager to reach Jackson. Kade used the last of the coffee to make a weak brew, and they ate the final scraps of jerky in silence, saving their energy for the long ride ahead. The morning was cool, almost cold, and June shivered until the sun rose high enough to warm them. The trail climbed steadily into the foothills, winding through stands of juniper and pinon pine. The horse labored under their combined weight, but she was a strong mare and kept a steady pace. By noon, they'd crested the pass and could see the valley below, green along the river where Jackson sat like a child's toy town, small and neat and welcoming. "There it is," Kade said, pointing. "Home." June leaned forward in the saddle, straining to see. "It's beautiful. I didn't expect it to be so green. River makes all the difference. Without it, this would just be more desert, but the water allows things to grow, brings life to the land." They descended slowly, carefully, picking their way down the rocky trail until they reached the valley floor. As they got closer to town, they began to see signs of civilization. Fences marking property lines, cattle grazing in pastures, a wagon traveling the road ahead of them. A man working in a field waved as they passed, and Kade waved back, recognizing Tom Porter, who ran a small farm on the south edge of town. June sat up straighter as they entered Jackson proper, clearly nervous about the impression she'd make. Kade guided his horse down the main street, nodding to people he knew. A few gave him curious looks, noting his passenger, but nobody said anything rude. This was a polite town, generally speaking, and folks respected privacy. He stopped in front of the general store, a sturdy building with a false front and a porch where several chairs sat empty in the afternoon heat. "Wait here," he told June. "I'll talk to Mrs. Henderson first, see about getting you settled." He dismounted and helped June down, noting how she kept her eyes lowered, trying not to draw attention. His heart ached for her, for the confidence that had been beaten out of her, for the way she tried to make herself small and unnoticeable. Inside the store, Martha Henderson looked up from where she was reorganizing bolts of fabric. She was a stout woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. She'd been one of the first settlers in Jackson and ran the store with efficiency and fairness. "Kade Zimmerman, as I live and breathe," she said with a smile. "Thought you'd be gone another week at least with that cattle drive. Finished early, got a good price in Tucson." He took off his hat, turning it in his hands. "Martha, I need a favor, and I need you to trust me on this." Her expression grew serious immediately. "What kind of favor?" "There's a woman outside, name's June Oaks. She's a teacher, used to work at an academy in San Antonio. She's looking to start over somewhere fresh, and I thought maybe Jackson could use someone like her. I know the schoolhouse has been without a proper teacher since Miss Stevens left." Martha studied him carefully. "And how do you know this woman?" "I found her by a creek 2 days' ride from here, washing clothes and walking toward anywhere that wasn't where she'd been. She's running from a bad marriage, Martha. Husband was cruel to her, and she had to leave or end up dead. I brought her here because I thought she deserved a chance at a better life." "You always were a soft touch," Martha said, but there was approval in her voice. "Where's she from originally?" "Georgia by way of Texas. She's educated, well-spoken, and brave as they come. Walked 2 days through dangerous country with nothing but determination. The kind of woman this town needs." Martha nodded slowly. "All right, I'll talk to her, see what I think. If she's as you say, we can convene the town council tonight and discuss hiring her. In the meantime, she can stay in the room behind the store. I keep it for travelers who need a place." "Thank you, Martha. I knew I could count on you. Don't thank me yet. If she's not what you claim, I'll send her packing, your vouching be damned. We've got children to think of." "Fair enough." He led June inside and watched as Martha took her measure with those sharp eyes. June stood tall despite her exhaustion and dirty clothes, meeting Martha's gaze directly. "Miss Oaks," Martha said, "Kade here tells me you're a teacher looking for work." "Yes, madam. I taught literature and history at the Fairview Academy for Young Ladies in San Antonio for 3 years. I have letters of reference in my bag if you'd like to see them. I would, actually. Can't be too careful these days. But Martha's tone had warmed slightly. Why don't you come with me, and we'll get you cleaned up and fed while I look over those references. Kade, you can go on home. I'll send word if we need you for the council meeting. Kade hesitated, not wanting to leave June alone, but June gave him a small nod. Thank you for everything, Mr. Zimmerman. I truly don't know what I would have done without your help. It was my pleasure, Miss Oakes. I hope Jackson treats you well. He left the store feeling strangely empty, like he'd set down a burden he hadn't known he was carrying and now didn't quite know what to do with his free hands. He rode out to his ranch, taking in the familiar sights with new eyes. The house looked smaller than he remembered, more lonely. The land stretched out empty and quiet, no voice but the wind and the animals. He tended to his horse, giving her extra grain as thanks for carrying double for 2 days, then went inside to clean up properly. The house smelled stale from being closed up, and dust covered every surface. He opened windows to air it out, then heated water for a bath, scrubbing away 3 weeks of trail dirt and sweat. Clean and shaved, wearing fresh clothes, he sat on his porch and watched the sun set over the valley. He kept thinking about June, wondering if Martha had approved of her, if the council would agree to hire her if she was comfortable and safe. It was foolish to worry so much about a woman he barely knew, but he couldn't seem to help it. Just after dark, a rider approached. It was Peter Chase, the deputy, a young man of about 22 with an eager smile and too much energy. "Mr. Zimmerman," he called out. "Mrs. Henderson sent me to fetch you. Council's meeting in an hour at the schoolhouse to discuss the new teacher." "I'll be there," Kade assured him. He saddled a fresh horse, one of his 2 geldings, and rode back into town under the stars. The schoolhouse was lit up, lanterns glowing in the windows, and he could see people gathering. The town council consisted of Martha Henderson, Sheriff Thomas Wright, Reverend Samuel Morris, and Dr. Elizabeth Keene, the only female Dr. Kade had ever met and a force of nature in her own right. Inside, June sat on a bench at the front, looking small and nervous despite her clean dress and neatly pinned hair. Martha must have lent her clothes, because the blue calico she wore was much nicer than the worn dress she'd arrived in. Her hair shone in the lamplight, and her face, clean of trail dust, showed her youth and the fading bruise along her jaw more clearly. Kade took a seat in the back, not wanting to influence the proceedings, but June turned and met his eyes. He gave her an encouraging nod, and some of the tension left her shoulders. Sheriff Wright called the meeting to order, his weathered face serious under his gray mustache. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We're here to discuss hiring Miss June Oakes as our new schoolteacher." "Martha, you've reviewed her references." "I have," Martha said, standing. "They're impeccable. 3 years at her respected academy, glowing recommendations from the headmistress and 2 other teachers. Miss Oakes is qualified to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, and literature. She's exactly what we've been looking for." "What about her background?" This from Reverend Morris, a thin man with kind eyes. "I don't mean to pry, but we should know something of where she comes from." June stood, her hands clasped in front of her. "I understand your concern, Reverend. I grew up in Georgia, moved to Texas with my family after the war. I taught at the academy until 8 months ago when I married. My husband turned out to be a cruel man, and 3 days ago, I left him to save my own life. I've returned to my maiden name and hope to start fresh here in Jackson. I can't change my past, but I can promise you that I'm a dedicated teacher who will do right by your children." The honesty of her answer seemed to catch everyone off guard. People shifted in their seats, exchanging glances. Dr. Keene, a striking woman in her 40s with silver-streaked dark hair, spoke up. "Were you injured, Miss Oakes? That bruise on your jaw looks fairly recent." "Yes, madam, among other injuries that have since healed. My husband had a violent temper." "And he let you leave?" June's expression hardened slightly. "He didn't have much choice in the matter. We struggled, his gun went off, and I left while he was bleeding. I don't know if he survived, and frankly, I don't care. I did what I had to do to survive." Another exchange of glances, but Kade saw approval in Dr. Keene's eyes. The doctor had her own reputation for being unconventional, having trained in Boston before coming west to practice medicine, where she wouldn't be judged too harshly for her gender. "I, for one, think we'd be lucky to have Miss Oakes," Dr. Keene said firmly. "Any woman with the courage to escape a dangerous situation and make her way alone through hostile territory has the kind of strength we need in a teacher. Children need to see that strength, especially the girls." "I agree," Martha added. "We've been without a proper teacher for months, and Miss Oakes is more than qualified. Her personal circumstances are unfortunate, but they speak to her character, not against it." Sheriff Wright nodded slowly. "Kade, you brought her here. What can you tell us about her?" Kade stood, feeling all eyes turned to him. "I found Miss Oakes 2 days ago by a creek, trying to wash blood out of her husband's shirt. She was alone, on foot, with barely any supplies, but she was determined to keep going. In the 2 days we traveled together, she never complained once, never asked for more than I offered, and never expected anything from me. She's brave and smart and honest. I'd trust her with children without a second thought." "High praise from a man known for keeping to himself," Reverend Morris observed with a slight smile. "Very well. I move that we hire Miss Oakes as our school teacher at the standard salary with room and board included." "Seconded," Dr. Keene said immediately. "All in favor?" Sheriff Wright asked. 4 hands went up. The motion was unanimous. June's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "Thank you, all of you. I promise I won't let you down." "School starts Monday," Martha told her. "That gives you 4 days to settle in and prepare. The teaching quarters behind the schoolhouse are yours, and I'll make sure you have everything you need. Welcome to Jackson, Miss Oakes." People stood to leave, several stopping to introduce themselves to June and welcome her to town. Kade hung back, watching her smile and shake hands, seeing the relief and joy in her face. She deserved this, deserved a chance at happiness and safety. He was about to slip out when she caught his eye and excused herself from the conversation she was having. She crossed the room to him, and up close he could see the gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Kade said. "Just be happy, that's payment enough. Will I see you again?" The question was tentative, almost shy. "I'm sure we'll cross paths. It's a small town." "I'd like that. Maybe you could tell me about the children I'll be teaching. Help me understand what they need. I'd be happy to." He smiled at her, feeling that warmth in his chest again. "Get some rest, Miss Oakes. You've earned it." "June," she corrected softly. "After everything we've been through, I think you can call me June." "June," he repeated, liking the way her name felt in his mouth. "Rest well, June." He left before he could say anything else, before he could make a fool of himself. The ride home felt longer than usual, and his house felt emptier. He lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, thinking about honey-colored eyes and a woman brave enough to fight for her own freedom. The next few days passed in a blur of ranch work. Kade threw himself into mending fences, tending cattle, and all the tasks he'd let slide during the cattle drive. But his mind kept wandering to town, wondering how June was settling in, if she needed anything, if she was happy. On Saturday, he convinced himself that he needed supplies from the general store, even though he had plenty of everything. He rode into town, telling himself he was just being neighborly, that it was normal to check on someone new to the area. Martha gave him a knowing look when he walked into the store but didn't comment. "If you're looking for Miss Oakes, she's at the schoolhouse, getting the place ready for Monday." "I just wanted to see if she needed anything," Kade said, feeling his ears heat up. "I'm sure she'd appreciate the help. That schoolhouse hasn't been properly cleaned in months." He found June at the schoolhouse, sweeping the floor with determination. She'd tied her hair back with a ribbon and wore a simple brown dress with an apron over it. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows, and she looked so right there, so at home, that it made his heart ache. "Need any help?" he asked from the doorway. She spun around, startled, then smiled when she saw him. "Kade, I wasn't expecting you. Thought you might need an extra pair of hands. This place is bigger than it looks." "I won't say no to help. I'm trying to get everything clean and organized before Monday, and there's so much to do." They worked together through the afternoon, scrubbing desks and washing windows and organizing the few books the school had. June told him about her plans for lessons, her ideas for making learning engaging and fun. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Kade found himself making suggestions, telling her about the children she'd be teaching and their individual quirks and challenges. "Tommy Miller's 8 and has trouble sitting still," he said, while they moved desks into neat rows. "But he loves stories about animals. If you can work those into lessons, he'll pay attention." "That's helpful, thank you. What about the older children?" "Sarah Campbell's 13 and smart as a whip, but her family's struggling financially, so she might miss days to help at home." "Don't hold it against her." "And Jacob Stone, he's 15 and thinks he's too old for school, but he's actually hungry for learning. He just doesn't want the other boys to think he's soft." June listened carefully, taking mental notes. "You really care about these children, don't you? They're good kids, all of them. They deserve a good teacher, someone who'll see their potential and help them reach it." He paused, then added, "Like you." She ducked her head, but he saw the pleased smile. "I hope I can live up to that. It's been 8 months since I taught, and I'm nervous about starting again." "You'll be wonderful. I have no doubt." They finished cleaning as the sun set, the schoolhouse transformed from dusty and neglected to warm and welcoming. June lit a few lamps, illuminating the space, and stood in the center of the room with her hands on her hips, surveying their work. "It looks perfect," she said with satisfaction. "Thank you, Kade. I couldn't have done this without you." "My pleasure." He picked up his hat from where he'd set it on a desk. "I should get going, let you rest." "Wait." June crossed to him quickly, reaching out as if to touch his arm, then pulling back at the last moment. "Would you like to stay for supper?" "I don't have much, just some stew Martha gave me, but there's plenty for 2. Kade knew he should say no, should maintain proper distance and not give her the wrong idea, but the hopeful look in her eyes undid him. "I'd like that very much." Her living quarters were small but cozy. A single room with a bed in one corner, a small stove, a table with 2 chairs, and a few shelves for personal belongings. She'd already made it her own with a few touches. Wildflowers in a jar on the table, her books arranged neatly on a shelf, a colorful quilt on the bed that Martha must have provided. She heated the stew while Kade sat at the table, feeling too large for the small space but comfortable nonetheless. They ate together, talking about everything and nothing. She told him more about her time teaching, about her favorite students and the joy of seeing children discover they could learn. He told her about ranch life, about the satisfaction of working with animals and the land, about watching something you built with your own hands take shape and thrive. "You ever get lonely out there?" June asked, studying him across the table. Sometimes, he admitted. Especially in winter when the days are short and it's too cold to do much outside. But mostly I like the solitude. It's peaceful. I think I'm going to like it here, June said softly. Everyone's been so kind, and having my own place, my own work, it feels like a dream. Like I'm going to wake up and find out none of this is real. It's real, Kade assured her. You earned it, June. You fought for it and you made it here, and you deserve every bit of happiness you find. She reached across the table and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you. For believing in me when I'd almost stopped believing in myself. Her hand was small in his, her palm calloused from work but soft too, feminine. He looked down at their joined hands and felt something shift in his chest, some certainty settling into place. He was falling for her, had been falling since that first moment by the creek. It was too soon and probably foolish, but it was happening anyway, as inevitable as the sunrise. June, he started, not sure what he was going to say, but she pulled her hand back gently, standing to clear their plates. I should let you go. You probably have early morning chores. He recognized the deflection for what it was, her way of maintaining boundaries she needed. He stood, respecting that even though part of him wanted to stay, wanted to tell her what he was feeling. But it was too soon, and she needed time to heal, to find herself again without the shadow of a man looming over her. Thank you for supper, he said. If you need anything, my ranch is just 5 miles south of town, right where the creek bends around that big outcropping of red rock. You can't miss it. I'll remember that. He left, riding home under the stars, his hand still warm from where she'd held it. Monday morning, the schoolhouse bell rang for the first time in months, calling the children to learning. Kade heard it from his ranch, the clear tone carrying across the valley, and he smiled. He imagined June standing at the front of the classroom, nervous but ready, about to start the next chapter of her life. Over the next few weeks, he found excuses to go into town more often than usual. He'd stop by the general store and hear Martha talk about how well the children were taking to their new teacher. He'd chat with parents who praised June's dedication and kindness. He'd see her sometimes, walking down the main street or tending the small garden behind the schoolhouse, and they'd exchange waves and smiles. But he didn't push, didn't impose on her time. He wanted to give her space to settle in, to find her footing in this new life. Even though it killed him sometimes, staying away when all he wanted was to be near her, he forced himself to be patient. Then, about a month after she'd arrived, June came to his ranch. He was working in the barn, repairing a broken stall door when he heard hoofbeats approaching. He looked out to see June riding a borrowed horse, her face flushed from the exertion and the sun. She dismounted somewhat awkwardly, clearly not an experienced rider, and tied the horse to the hitching post. June, he said, coming out of the barn, is everything all right? Everything's fine, she assured him quickly. I just wanted to see you, to talk if you have time. I always have time for you, he gestured toward the house. Come inside, it's cooler. She followed him into the small house, looking around with interest. It was sparse, just the basics, but clean and well-maintained. He poured her water from the pitcher he kept cool in the root cellar and motioned for her to sit at the table. I've been thinking, June started, then paused, gathering her thoughts. About you and about everything you've done for me. I feel like I haven't properly thanked you. You don't need to thank me, Kade said for what felt like the 100th time. I know you keep saying that, but I want to. She took a breath. The truth is, I've been thinking about you a lot, more than I probably should. And I needed to know if you've been thinking about me too, or if I'm reading too much into every smile and every kind word. Kade's heart hammered in his chest. This was it, the moment he'd been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. He could play it safe, could pretend he didn't know what she meant. Or he could be honest, risk his heart on a woman who might not be ready, who might never be ready. He chose honesty. "I've been thinking about you since the moment I saw you by that creek," he said quietly. "I think about you every day. Wonder if you're happy, if you need anything, if you think of me even half as much as I think of you. I've been giving you space because I thought that's what you needed. But if I'm being honest, staying away has been the hardest thing I've ever done." June's eyes widened, then softened. "Really? Really? June, I know it's fast, and I know you're still healing from everything you went through. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But if you're asking whether I care about you, whether I'm interested in more than friendship, then the answer is yes. Absolutely yes." She stood up, and for a moment Kade thought she was going to leave, thought he'd said too much too soon. But instead, she crossed to where he sat and took his face in her hands, tilting his head up to look at her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared of trusting someone again, scared of giving up the independence I've only just found. But I'm more scared of walking away from this, from you, and always wondering what could have been." "What are you saying?" Kade asked, hardly daring to breathe. "I'm saying I'd like to try. Slowly, carefully, but I'd like to see where this goes. Because you make me feel safe in a way I've never felt safe before, and you make me happy, genuinely happy. And I think maybe that's worth being brave for." Kade stood, covering her hands with his own. "We'll go as slow as you need. No pressure, no expectations. Just you and me, getting to know each other proper like." June smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I'd like that very much." They courted the old-fashioned way with propriety and patience. Kade would come to town on Sundays and walk June to church, sitting beside her in the pews and feeling proud to have her next to him. After services, they'd take walks along the river, talking about their weeks and their hopes and dreams. He brought her wildflowers he picked himself, and she baked him pies and bread that he swore were the best things he'd ever tasted. The town watched with approval. Martha Henderson made sure everyone knew that Kade Zimmerman was courting the schoolteacher proper, and anyone who had concerns about June's past could take it up with her. Not that anyone did. June had won over the town quickly with her dedication to the children and her quiet kindness to everyone she met. The children loved her. That was clear to anyone who saw her with them. She made learning exciting, told stories that brought history to life, and organized games that taught mathematics without the students realizing they were learning. Parents reported that their children actually wanted to go to school now, that they came home excited about what they'd learned. Kade would sometimes stop by the schoolhouse in the afternoon when lessons were done, ostensibly to fix something or help with a heavy task, but really just to see June. He loved watching her with the children, seeing the joy in her face when one of them grasped a difficult concept, or the patience she showed when someone struggled. "You're good with them," he told her one day as they walked along the creek after school. "They're good children. Smart and eager to learn, every one of them. Even Jacob Stone, who pretends he doesn't care but stays after sometimes to ask questions about books." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Teaching makes me feel useful, like I'm contributing something meaningful to the world." "You are," Kade assured her. "These children are lucky to have you." They'd been courting for 2 months when he first kissed her. It was evening, and he'd just walked her home from a town social where they'd danced together for the first time. They stood on the small porch outside her quarters, the lamplight soft behind her, and she'd looked up at him with those honey-colored eyes, and he'd been lost. "June," he'd whispered, "may I kiss you?" She'd answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his, soft and sweet and perfect. It was a gentle kiss, respectful and tender, but it sent electricity through his entire body. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "I've been wondering when you'd ask," she said. "I wanted to make sure you were ready." "I'm ready." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Kade, I need to tell you something. I was so afraid when I left Jacob, afraid I'd never be able to trust anyone again. But you've shown me that not all men are like him. You've been patient and kind and respectful, and you've never asked for more than I could give. I think I'm falling in love with you." Kade's heart soared. "You think? All right, I know. I'm falling in love with you, Kade Zimmerman, and it's terrifying and wonderful all at once." "I'm already in love with you," he confessed. "Have been for a while now. I love your strength and your kindness, and the way you light up when you talk about your students. I love the way you look at the world like it's full of possibilities. I love everything about you, June." They kissed again, longer this time, deeper, until they were both breathless and June had to step back before things went too far. "I should go inside," she said reluctantly, "before the whole town starts talking." "Let them talk," Kade said, but he released her hand. "Sweet dreams, June." "Sweet dreams." He walked back to his horse feeling like he was floating, like nothing could bring him down from the joy coursing through him. He was in love, truly in love, and she loved him back. It felt like a miracle, like the universe had conspired to bring them together on that day by the creek. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. They spent as much time together as propriety and their responsibilities allowed. Kade brought June out to his ranch, and she fell in love with the land, with the wide open spaces and the beauty of the desert. She helped him tend the garden, proving to have a natural talent for making things grow, and she befriended his animals, giving them all names and treating them like pets. "You have a good life here," she told him one Sunday afternoon as they sat on his porch watching the sunset. "It's peaceful and beautiful. It could be even better," Kade said carefully, "if you were here all the time." June turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "Kade, are you asking what I think you're asking?" He took a deep breath, then slid off his chair to kneel before her, taking her hand in both of his. "June Oaks, I know we've only known each other a few months, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore. You make every day brighter, every moment more meaningful. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down June's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, of course, yes. I love you, Kade. I want to build a life with you, here on this beautiful land. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. Yes, I'll marry you." Kade pulled her down into his arms, holding her tight, feeling like his heart might burst from happiness. They kissed, deep and passionate, full of promise and joy. "We'll have to find a new teacher for the school," June said when they finally pulled apart. "Maybe," Kade agreed. "Or maybe we could find a way for you to keep teaching. The town loves you and the children need you." "How?" "Once we're married, I'll have responsibilities here, running a household, helping with the ranch work. We'll figure it out together. Maybe you could teach part-time, or maybe we could get an assistant teacher to share the work. I don't want you to give up something you love just because we're getting married." June cupped his face in her hands. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I'm the lucky one," Kade insisted. They set the wedding for mid-December, giving them time to plan and for word to reach Emma in St. Louis. Kade wrote to his sister immediately, telling her about June and begging her to come for the wedding. Her reply came 3 weeks later, an excited letter promising she wouldn't miss it for the world and couldn't wait to meet the woman who'd captured her brother's heart. The town threw itself into wedding preparations with enthusiasm. Martha Henderson organized the women to make a new dress for June, something beautiful and special. The men worked on fixing up Kade's house, adding a second room and making repairs he'd been putting off. Reverend Morris agreed to perform the ceremony at the church, and everyone was invited to the celebration afterward. June was radiant with happiness, though Kade sometimes caught shadows in her eyes, moments when the past intruded on the present. He learned that she'd received word through a lawyer that Jacob had survived the shooting, but had been arrested for assault on another woman and was serving time in a Texas prison. His brother Miguel had apparently washed his hands of the whole situation, wanting nothing to do with the scandal. "You're safe now," Kade told her when she shared the news. "He can't hurt you anymore, I know. And I'm glad, truly. But sometimes I still wake up in the night expecting him to be there, expecting violence. Old fears die hard. I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that you're safe, that you're loved, that you never have to be afraid again," Kade promised. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the December sun bright in a cloudless sky. The church was packed with townspeople, all dressed in their Sunday best, excited to witness the union. Emma had arrived 2 days before, and she and June had bonded immediately, spending hours talking and laughing like old friends. "She's perfect for you," Emma told Kade the night before the wedding. "Strong and smart and kind. Mama would have loved her." "I wish Mama could have met her," Kade said wistfully. "I think she knows," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "And I think she's happy seeing you so happy." Now, standing at the altar watching June walk down the aisle on Sheriff Wright's arm, since she had no father to give her away, Kade felt tears prick his eyes. She was beautiful in her new dress, white with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, her dark hair pinned up with small flowers woven through it. But more than her beauty, it was the joy in her face, the certainty in her steps that took his breath away. She reached the altar and took his hands, and Reverend Morris began the ceremony. Kade barely heard the words, too focused on June's face, on the promise in her eyes. When it came time for vows, he spoke from his heart. "June, I promise to love you and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your shelter in storms and your companion in calm. I promise to respect your dreams and support your goals. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me, to never take for granted the gift of your love. You are my partner, my equal, my best friend, and I am honored to call you my wife." June's voice was steady despite her tears. "Kade, you found me when I was lost and helped me find myself again. You showed me what real love looks like, what it means to be respected and valued. I promise to love you with everything I am, to build a life with you that honors both of our dreams. I promise to be your partner in all things, to stand beside you through whatever life brings. You are my home, my safe harbor, my heart. I am honored to call you my husband." Reverend Morris pronounced them husband and wife, and when Kade kissed June, the church erupted in applause and cheers. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, smiling so hard their faces hurt, and stepped out into the sunshine as Mr. and Mrs. Zimmerman. The celebration that followed was joyous, with food and music and dancing. Kade danced with his bride, with his sister, with Martha Henderson and Dr. Keene, and every woman who asked. But his eyes always found June, wherever she was in the room, and he saw her doing the same, seeking him out like she needed to make sure he was real, that this was really happening. As the sun set and the party wound down, Kade and June climbed into his wagon, now decorated with ribbons and flowers by helpful hands, and headed out to the ranch. Their ranch now, their home. Inside the house, which had been prepared by Emma and several other women with candles and flowers and turned-down bedsheets, they finally had privacy. June turned to Kade, suddenly shy. "I should tell you," she said quietly, "Jacob was cruel in all ways. I don't have good experiences with intimacy, but I want to try with you. I want to reclaim that part of myself, make new memories that aren't tainted by fear." Kade took her hands gently. "We'll go as slow as you need. There's no rush, June. We have the rest of our lives. And if you need to stop at any point, for any reason, you just say so. Your comfort and your feelings matter more than anything else." She rose on her toes and kissed him softly. "Thank you. For understanding, for being patient. I love you so much. I love you too." They took their time, Kade moving slowly, carefully, checking in with June at every step. She was nervous at first, but gradually relaxed in his arms, learning that intimacy could be tender, that it could be about mutual pleasure and love rather than domination. When they finally came together, it was beautiful and emotional, both of them crying tears of joy and release. Afterward, lying tangled together in their marriage bed, June pressed her face against Kade's chest and whispered, "Thank you for making this beautiful, for being so gentle and patient." "That was everything I hoped it could be." Kade kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "Every time will be like that, I promise, because it's about us together, not about one person taking from the other. We're partners in everything, June. Never forget that." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, safe and loved, and finally home. The winter passed in quiet happiness. June continued teaching, with Kade's full support and help. He would drive her to town in the mornings and pick her up in the afternoons when weather allowed. On days when snow made the roads impassable, the school closed, and they spent cozy days inside, reading and talking and making love. Emma stayed through Christmas before returning to St. Louis, promising to visit again in the spring. Before she left, she pulled June aside and hugged her tight. "Thank you for making my brother so happy," Emma said. "I haven't seen him smile this much since before our mother died. You're good for him." "He's good for me too," June replied. "He saved my life in more ways than one." Spring came, and with it new life on the ranch. Calves were born, the garden burst into bloom, and June discovered she was pregnant. She told Kade on a Sunday morning in April, as they lay in bed watching the sunrise through their window. "I'm going to have a baby," she said simply, watching his face. Kade's expression cycled through shock, joy, and wonder in rapid succession. "Truly, truly. Dr. Keene confirmed it yesterday. I'm about 3 months along, I think. The baby should come in late September or early October." Kade whooped with joy, pulling June into his arms and peppering her face with kisses. "We're going to be parents. June, this is wonderful," she laughed, delighted by his enthusiasm. "I hoped you'd be happy. I know we hadn't planned it quite this soon, but I'm excited." "A little scared, but mostly excited." "We'll figure it out together," Kade assured her. "We'll hire someone to help with the teaching, and you can rest as much as you need. I'll take care of everything." "I want to keep teaching as long as I can," June said. "The children are important to me." "But yes, we'll need to make arrangements." They found a young woman named Sarah Preston who had recently moved to Jackson and was delighted to take over teaching duties once June needed to stop. June worked with her through the summer, training her and introducing her to the children, making sure they'd be in good hands. As June's belly grew, Kade found himself overwhelmed with love and protectiveness. He built a cradle with his own hands, smooth and sturdy, and June sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They spent evenings on the porch, June's feet in Kade's lap as he rubbed them, talking about names and the future and what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want our children to feel safe," June said one evening. "To know they're loved unconditionally, that their home is a place of peace and support." "They will," Kade promised. "We'll make sure of it. No child of ours will ever know fear or violence or conditional love. That I swear." The baby came on a crisp October morning, with Dr. Keene attending and Martha Henderson helping. Kade paced outside, forbidden from the room by tradition, listening to June's cries and feeling utterly helpless. It seemed to take forever, but finally, a baby's wail pierced the air, and moments later Dr. Keene emerged with a smile. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy, strong boy, and June did wonderfully. She's tired but fine." Kade rushed into the room to find June propped up in bed, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Her hair was damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. She looked up when he entered, and her smile took his breath away. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Kade approached reverently, looking down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and scrunched-up features, his little fists waving in the air. He was perfect. "He's beautiful," Kade whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength, and Kade felt his heart expand in ways he hadn't known were possible. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Thomas, after your mother's father," June said. "Tommy for short." "Thomas Zimmerman," Kade said, testing the name. "I love it. Thank you, June, for him, for everything. You've given me a family, something I never thought I'd have." "We gave each other a family," June corrected gently. "And we'll raise him with love and kindness, and he'll never doubt he's wanted." They spent that first week in a haze of sleeplessness and joy, learning how to care for their son. Tommy was a good baby, as babies went, crying when he needed something but easily soothed by his mother's voice or his father's arms. Emma sent a telegram of congratulations and promised to visit in the spring to meet her nephew. As the years passed, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. June taught part-time once Tommy was old enough, sharing duties with Sarah, who'd proven to be an excellent teacher. Kade expanded the ranch gradually, never overextending but growing steadily. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Grace when Tommy was 3, and another son, Samuel, 2 years after that. Their house was filled with laughter and love, with the sound of children playing and learning. June taught them to read early, instilling in them her love of stories and knowledge. Kade taught them to ride and work with the land, to respect animals and understand the cycles of nature. The children grew up knowing they were loved, knowing their home was safe. They saw their parents work as partners, saw their father treat their mother with respect and affection, saw their mother pursue her own passions while also being a devoted mother. It shaped them into good people, confident and kind. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kade and June sat on their porch as the sun set, watching their children play in the yard. Tommy, now 9, was teaching 6-year-old Grace to throw a rope, while 3-year-old Samuel toddled around trying to help. "You ever miss your old life?" Kade asked, taking June's hand. "The academy, the city," June smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Not even a little. This is everything I ever wanted but never thought I'd have. A home filled with love, work that matters, children who are happy and healthy, and a husband who cherishes me. How could I miss anything when I have all this?" "I think about that day I found you by the creek sometimes," Kade said. "Wonder what would have happened if I'd taken a different trail, if we'd never met." "I think we were meant to find each other," June said firmly. "I was trying to start over, and you helped me do exactly that. You gave me a new life, Kade, a better life than I ever imagined possible." "You gave me one too," he said, kissing her temple. "I was lonely before you, even though I didn't fully realize it. You brought light and laughter and love into my world. You made this house a home." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue, watching the stars emerge one by one. Their children's voices carried on the evening air, happy and carefree. Inside, Dinner waited on the stove, and after the children were in bed, they'd have the evening to themselves, to talk and laugh and love each other as they'd done for 10 years and would continue to do for decades to come. "I love you," June said softly. "I love you too," Kade replied. "Always and forever." And he meant it with every fiber of his being. This woman who'd washed blood from a shirt by a creek, who'd been brave enough to run and start over, who trusted him when trust didn't come easy, she was his heart, his home, his everything. And he would spend every day of the rest of his life making sure she knew it, making sure she never regretted the day she'd looked up to see a cowboy leading his horse to water and decided to trust one more time. The years continued to be kind to the Zimmerman family. As the children grew, so did the ranch and their reputation in the community. Tommy showed an aptitude for ranching, often riding out with his father and learning every aspect of the business. Grace proved to have her mother's love of learning and often helped June with teaching the younger children in town. Samuel, the youngest, had a gift with animals, able to calm even the most skittish horse with just his presence and gentle words. June never stopped teaching, though she adjusted her schedule as needed for her family. She became known throughout the territory as an exceptional educator, and families sometimes moved to Jackson specifically so their children could attend her school. She wrote letters to her former colleagues at the academy in San Antonio, sharing teaching methods and stories, maintaining connections to that part of her past that had been good. Kade's ranch prospered through hard work and smart management. He brought in better breeding stock, improved his land with irrigation from the creek, and became known for raising quality cattle and horses. But he never let success change him. He remained the kind, patient man who'd helped a desperate woman by a creek, always ready to lend a hand to neighbors or newcomers who needed assistance. Emma visited regularly, bringing her husband after she married, and then their children. The cousins grew up close despite the distance, writing letters and treasuring the times they could be together. Emma often thanked June for bringing such joy to her brother's life, for giving him the family he deserved. The town of Jackson grew too, evolving from a dusty frontier settlement into a proper community. New businesses opened, more families arrived, and infrastructure improved. Through it all, the Zimmerman family remained central to the community's life. Kade served on the town council. June continued teaching, and their children grew into respected young adults. When Tommy turned 18, he told his parents he wanted to expand the ranch, to build his own section on the far end of their property. Kade helped him do exactly that, giving him land and cattle to start with, teaching him everything he knew. Father and son worked side by side, their relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Grace announced at 19 that she wanted to attend the normal school in Phoenix, to become a certified teacher. It meant leaving home for a year, something that terrified and excited her in equal measure. June and Kade supported her dream completely, scraping together the tuition and helping her prepare. "You've always encouraged us to pursue our dreams," Grace said as they helped her pack. "I want to be a teacher like you, Mama, but I want to learn all the newest methods, bring them back here to help more children." "I'm so proud of you," June said, hugging her daughter tight. "You're going to do wonderful things." Samuel, at 16, declared his intention to become a veterinarian, having read every book he could find on animal medicine and proven himself naturally talented at healing sick or injured creatures. It would require more schooling than was available locally, but Kade and June were determined to find a way to support his dream too. "We want you all to have choices," Kade told his children over dinner one night. "To build lives that make you happy, whatever that looks like." Your mother and I didn't have many choices when we were young, and we want better for you. But we hope you'll stay close," June added with a smile. "It's selfish, I know, but I love having my family near." "Where else would we want to be?" Tommy asked, grinning. "This is home. It always will be." 20 years after their wedding, Kade planned a surprise party to celebrate. He enlisted the children's help, along with half the town, to organize a celebration at the church hall. When he brought June into town under the pretense of a town council meeting, she walked into a room full of friends and family, all there to honor their marriage and their contribution to the community. June cried happy tears as people shared stories of how she'd impacted their lives. Former students, now adults with children of their own, talked about how her teaching had opened doors for them. Parents thanked her for caring for their children as if they were her own. Neighbors praised Kade's generosity and integrity, his willingness to help anyone who needed it. 20 years ago, I found a woman by a creek, Kade said when it was his turn to speak, looking directly at June. She told me she was trying to start over, and I offered to help. What I didn't know then was that she would transform my life completely. She turned a house into a home, an empty space into a family. She brought joy and purpose and love into my world. June, these 20 years have been the best of my life, and I look forward to spending at least 20 more by your side." June stood, crossing to him and taking his hands. "And you gave me everything I thought I'd lost. Safety, respect, love, purpose. You showed me what a real partnership looks like, what it means to be truly cherished. You gave me the courage to reclaim my life and build something beautiful. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's how it works, Kade. The love just keeps growing." They kissed to thunderous applause, surrounded by the community they'd helped build, the family they'd created, the life they'd chosen together. More years passed, bringing changes and challenges as life always does. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated births and mourned deaths, adapted to progress, and held tight to what mattered most. Through it all, their love remained constant, the foundation on which everything else was built. Tommy married a rancher's daughter named Catherine, and they gave Kade and June their first grandchildren, twin boys who had Tommy's dark hair and Catherine's blue eyes. The twins were followed by 2 more children, keeping the ranch house lively and full. Tommy built up his section of the ranch successfully, proving himself his father's equal in ranching skill and his mother's equal in integrity. Grace returned from normal school with her certification and a fiancé, a fellow teacher named Michael who'd grown up in Phoenix. They married and settled in Jackson, where Grace took over more of the teaching duties as June gradually reduced her hours. Michael taught the older students, and together they expanded the school, adding new subjects and modern equipment. Samuel completed his veterinary training and returned to Jackson to open a practice, becoming invaluable to the ranching community. He married a doctor's daughter named Alice, who trained as a nurse, and they worked together caring for animals and occasionally people when Dr. Keene needed assistance. All 3 children built their lives in or near Jackson, creating a sprawling extended family that gathered every Sunday for dinner, rotating between houses. The grandchildren grew up surrounded by love and cousins, learning the same values Kade and June had instilled in their own children. As they aged, Kade and June gradually stepped back from active work, allowing the younger generation to take over. Kade taught Tommy and his grandsons everything about running the ranch, ensuring the legacy would continue. June mentored Grace and other young teachers, passing on decades of wisdom and experience. They spent more time together, just the 2 of them, rediscovering the simple pleasures that had brought them together. Long rides through the countryside, quiet evenings on the porch, mornings spent sleeping in and afternoons reading side by side. Their love had matured, deepened, becoming something even more beautiful than it had been in those early passionate days. On their 40th anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, they renewed their vows in the same church where they'd first married. June, now 63, still had those honey-colored eyes that had captured Kade's heart, though her dark hair was streaked with silver. Kade, at 66, had weathered into a distinguished-looking man, his face lined from years of sun and smiles. 40 years ago, I knelt by a creek and asked if I could kiss you, Kade said, holding both her hands. Today, I stand before God and family and ask if I can spend 40 more years loving you. You don't have to ask, June replied, tears streaming down her face. The answer is yes, today and always. You are my heart, Kade Zimmerman. My home, my love, my life. 40 years hasn't been nearly enough. They kissed, and their family erupted in cheers, the sound echoing off the church walls and spilling out into the Arizona sunshine. The celebration that followed was joyous, multiple generations coming together to honor a love story that had started with a desperate woman washing blood from a shirt, and a kind cowboy offering help without expecting anything in return. As evening fell and the party wound down, Kade and June slipped away to their ranch, to the house they'd built and filled with love. They sat on their porch, the same porch where they'd spent countless evenings, and watched the sun set over land they'd tended together for 4 decades. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" June asked, leaning against Kade's shoulder. "By the creek, when I said I was trying to start over." "I said starting over was brave," Kade recalled. "You said more than that. You said you'd help me get where I needed to go, and you did, Kade. You helped me find my way to a life I never dared to dream of, to happiness I didn't think existed." "We found it together," Kade corrected gently. "I was drifting before you, just going through the motions. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something that mattered. This family, this legacy, it's all because a woman was brave enough to start over and give love another chance." June lifted her face for a kiss, which Kade gladly gave. "I'd do it all again," she whispered. "Every hard moment, every scary decision, every uncertain step. Because they all led me here to you, to this life. I love you, June Zimmerman. From that first moment by the creek until my last breath, you are and will always be my everything. And I love you, Kade, my cowboy, my savior, my partner, my love. Thank you for finding me when I was lost. Thank you for letting me help you start over." They sat together as stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had watched over them that first night camping in the desert, the same stars that had witnessed every moment of their journey from strangers to soulmates. Around them, their ranch, their town, their family, all testified to the power of one moment of kindness, one decision to help a stranger, one chance meeting that changed 2 lives forever. In the years that followed, as they aged gracefully together, never spending a night apart unless absolutely necessary, always choosing each other every single day, they became legendary in Jackson. The older folks would point them out to newcomers, telling the story of how the schoolteacher came to town and captured the heart of the most eligible bachelor around. Younger couples would ask them for advice, wanting to know the secret to such a long and happy marriage. "There's no secret," June would say with a smile. "Just choice. We choose each other every day. We choose kindness over anger, forgiveness over resentment, love over everything else. And we remember where we came from," Kade would add. "June reminds me that people can change, that past mistakes don't define the future. I remind her that love doesn't have to hurt, That partnership means supporting each other's dreams. We both remember how lucky we are to have found each other. They lived long, full lives, blessed with good health and surrounded by family until the very end. Kade passed first at the age of 83, peacefully in his sleep with June beside him. His last words were, "I love you," and June held his hand as he slipped away, grateful for every moment they'd shared. She followed him 2 years later at 82, surrounded by children and grandchildren. Her last words were about Kade, about the cowboy who'd found her washing clothes by a creek and changed her life forever. She died with a smile on her face, ready to be reunited with her beloved husband. They were buried side by side in the Jackson Cemetery, under a cottonwood tree that reminded people of the creek where they'd met. Their headstone bore simple words, Kade and June Zimmerman. They chose love, and it chose them back. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations of Zimmermans who'd learned from Kade and June what it meant to work hard, love fully, and treat people with kindness and respect. The school still bore a plaque honoring June's decades of service, and every teacher who came after her tried to live up to her legacy of dedication and compassion. But their greatest legacy was the family they'd created, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward their values and their love. Those descendants would tell the story for generations, about how it all started with a woman trying to start over, and a man who chose to help, about how one act of kindness blossomed into a love story that lasted a lifetime and changed an entire community. Because that's what real love does. It starts with a single moment, a single choice, a single act of courage or kindness or hope. And then it grows, spreading out like ripples on water, touching more lives than anyone could imagine. Kade and June's love had started by a creek in the Arizona Territory in 1878, and it had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of second chances and the courage it takes to start over. They'd found each other when both of them needed it most, and they'd built a life that honored the struggles they'd overcome and the love they'd found. It wasn't always easy, and they'd faced their share of hardships and sorrows. But through it all, they'd had each other, and that had made all the difference. Their story became part of Jackson's history, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But to those who'd known them, who'd seen them walking hand in hand down the main street well into their 80s, who'd witnessed the way they looked at each other even after decades of marriage, it was simply the truth. A beautiful, honest truth about two people who'd found each other against all odds and chosen to build something extraordinary together. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods along the creek, old-timers would swear you could still feel their presence, still sense the love that had started there all those years ago. Some said it was just fancy, just imagination running wild, but others knew better. Love like that didn't just disappear. It soaked into the land, into the water, into the very air, blessing all who came after with its gentle, persistent presence. Kade and June Zimmerman had found each other, had loved each other, and had shown everyone around them what real love looked like. And in doing so, they'd created something that would last forever, a legacy of love that would inspire and guide long after they were gone. That was their gift to the world, their contribution to the universe, and it was more than enough. It was everything.